going on in the world system today. And I'm not going to talk about the economic realm, but rather about geopolitics. One of the points I did not have time to make this morning is, of course, that the U.S. is no longer the hegemonic power of the world system. It was the hegemonic power between approximately 1945 and 1970. Its hegemony declined, but slowly. From 1970 to 2000, it resisted it in various ways, more or less successfully. The period when the neocons governed the U.S. under George W. Bush was meant to counteract the decline. It failed totally. It indeed led to a precipitate decline and a definitive decline, which means that we're in a multilateral situation. Now, people often phrase this as though somebody else is going to pick up the ball right away. Not at all. Not at all. We are in a multilateral situation in which there are 8 or 10 foci of real geopolitical power. There's the United States. There's South America, led by Brazil. There's Western Europe. There's Russia. There's China. There's a smaller one, but South Africa. And there are more. There's Japan, of course. Now, there are 8, 10, 12 loci of real power, which means they have to be taken into account and taken seriously, and they can act autonomously. Now, that's too many. For any one of those 12 loci of power, the fact that there are 11 others is just too many. So they have to search for allies. And they're immediately, let me illustrate this with the case of Russia. And then you'll see, in answer to Professor Bogdanov's antinomy between is there something special about Russia, or is it doing what everybody else is doing, this part of my discussion is it's doing what everybody else is doing. Now, Russia has 3 major potential allies geopolitically. One is the United States, its old ally during the so-called Cold War, when it claimed to be fighting each other, but in fact were not. Okay, that's one possibility. The second is Western Europe, or the so-called Paris, Berlin, Moscow axis. And a third major one is China, through the Shanghai Consensus and so forth. Now, in fact, Russia hasn't made up its mind about this, and it keeps shifting back and forth between its emphasis on one or the other. But that's not special to Russia. I can do the same thing if I talk about U.S. foreign policy. I can do the same thing if I talk about Chinese foreign policy, about Japanese foreign policy, right? Or indeed about Egyptian or Saudi Arabian or Israeli and so forth. Everybody is playing the game of trying to figure out where is the best alliance possible over the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? That leads to wild fluctuations. So one week it seems strong on this end, and all of a sudden, quickly, it's quite different. Cyprus is a very good example of a shift from a how shall I say, a position of Russia that was kind of friendly to Western Europe to one in which there's immediately deep antagonism. It's no accident that almost at the same time President Putin sort of announced a relinking with the United States, because the United States, for its reasons, has announced that it's not going to pursue what do you call it?
Missile defense.
The attempt to have the missile defense supposedly against Iran, but Russia thinks it's against Russia. Now, these are wild fluctuations, and I don't guarantee that 6 months from now or a year from now there won't be a new gesture towards China of a very strong kind. So this is one of the fluctuating realities. Somebody said this morning that there's no struggle about currencies. That's nonsense. There's struggle all the time about currency, because although the U.S. currency is still the reserve currency of the world market, it's a very how shall I say, it's dependent on the willingness of a whole series of countries, China and Japan and Korea and Norway and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to constantly put their money into the dollar for good reasons, but also with the risk that the dollar will fall suddenly much faster. And it has, in fact, fallen compared to other currencies 30% in the last 15 years. So it's a serious shift. And it doesn't get replaced by another reserve currency. It gets replaced by a situation in which there isn't a reserve currency, in which we have 8 or 10 currencies which we move back and forth. Now that's paralyzing for investment purposes, because the one thing, I once asked a French capitalist, a genuine capitalist, he had a business, and he invested and so forth, how do you make a decision, right, about where to invest? He says, very simple. I want to know that I can get my money back in 3 years. If it takes longer than 3 years, I'm not interested because it's too risky. Now we have a situation in which capitalists cannot be assured that if they invest their money in a particular place, they'll get it back in 3 years, because the currency shifts could undo them completely. So that's part of the paralysis of the world system. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And if you have some questions to Professor Wallerstein, you're welcome. Пожалуйста. Да.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallerstein. I will speak in English. English.
Yeah. Okay.
So
No, it's better to use microphone. 1 minute.
I don't want to speak in Russian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallerstein. Теперь по-русски. Вопрос простой. Что вы думаете про будущее БРИКС, about the future of the BRICS and their coordination in the G20? Thank you very much.
Да, это было по-русски. Что такое БРИКС?
Well, the BRICS are, of course, another one of these alliances, and it depends on how seriously the various countries. I was just reading today an article, I now forget where, about the BRICS and the fact that that China alone.
I'm sorry. Maybe this microphone is better and closer. I'm really sorry.
That China alone has more GDP than the other four combined, and that gives it an extra strength there. So the readiness of Brazil and Russia and India, not to speak of South Africa, to commit themselves to the alliance that is the BRICS is an open question. It's one possibility, and they may do it this week and not next week. That's part of my point. So the BRICS are a reasonably important geopolitical development. There's no question about that. But their relationship to weaker countries in the South, and their relationship to the United States, to Western Europe, and so forth is still an open question.
Thank you very much. And last. Thank you very much. And one more question of Peter Schulze.
Peter Schulze from Göttingen University. If you talk about multilateral relations, you didn't use multipolar, the multipolar world.
A multipolar world. Yeah, we
Or
have a multipolar world.
Maybe we have one. Maybe we have a non-polar world.
A no-polar world.
Right.
Well, that's a way of saying it, but in fact...
Wait, I don't want to enhance on this, because we are going too fast into a field of political relations or international relations, and this is not our topic here. But what I was missing in your gloomy prediction about the decline of the European Union and the United States, and this is well written up in the CIA report and the NIC report, we all know about this, but there are countermeasures.
Of course.
Yes,
Of course.
there are countermeasures. For example, the ongoing discussions at the moment to create between the European Union and the United States a free trade zone. Yeah. What is your comment on this?
Thank you.
I don't think they're going to realize the free trade zone.
Use microphone and close.
I don't think they're going to realize the free trade zone. I think the U.S. and Western Europe are different. I think, actually, I may be one of the few people in the world who thinks that Western Europe is geopolitically stronger right now than the United States. I think the United States is in a situation which it finding very difficult to even understand itself, of where it's being ignored. Not merely not listened to, but ignored. That is to say, Saudi Arabia makes decisions today that are in Saudi Arabia's interests. In the previous times, they made decisions that were in the United States' interest. That's very different when Saudi Arabia, which was in many ways, how shall I say, a satellite of the United States, and in many ways totally controlled by it, today ignores the United States when it wants to do X in Syria or Y in Egypt or anywhere else. It doesn't consult the United States, and it doesn't pay attention to what the United States would prefer. The United States is absolutely paralyzed. It doesn't know what to do in Mali. It doesn't know what to do in Syria. And I must say, the wisdom of our president at the moment is that when you don't know what to do, don't do anything. And that's his current policy, right? But he thinks he can remedy that. I don't think he can remedy that. But okay, that's the situation.
Thank you, and I think we have to go further. Thank you so much, Professor.